What's going on, everybody? Ignis here. Hope your 2026 has been off to a better start than mine. New year means new albums. New albums means new tier list. And instead of me sitting here for 2.5 hours recording voiceovers for a year's worth of albums, I figured this year I'd make it a little easier on myself and break this tier list into 3-month stretches. So the 16 albums we're going to be talking about today have been from the start of January to the end of March. Other than that, though, we're going to stick to the same formula as last year's tier list. And as a quick rundown for anybody who might be coming into this video as the first they've seen from me, which would not be surprising, seeing as this is going to be only the second one, I'm going to be discussing and ranking the albums by original release date. In instances where multiple albums are released on the same day, we're going to go alphabetical order by band name. And we are discussing full-length studio efforts only. No live albums, no soundtracks, no compilations. I'm toying around with the idea of doing like a rapid fire segment at the end of the year for EPs, but it's going to depend on fan interest and if there are enough EPs to make it worth discussing. So let me know if that's something you'd like to hear for the year-end compilation. And also, if there are any albums that aren't on here that I didn't discuss that you've heard that have come out this year, go ahead and leave them in the comments for me, because I'm always looking to find more stuff, and I'm not going to go out and find all of it on my own, which is why other people are such a great resource. I've been jawing too long here, let's get into it. Kreator, Crushers of the World. Our first release of this new year returns us to a sound and locale that viewers of the 2025 list might be familiar with, as Kreator joined fellow Teutonic titans Destruction and Sodom in the trend of putting out really good albums well into their careers. Crushers of the World starts off on an immaculate note with the opening track Seven Serpents, whose spacious vibe, created by the harmonized opening lead and vocal swells that are later reprised in the bridge and outro with the addition of equally incredible choir chants, is a perfect showcase of the melodic focus that came with the band's more genre experimental middle era, and has persisted since. Meanwhile, the rest of the song's rapid-fire riffage is much more in line with the band's post-2000 return to the thrashing form. This melodically informed onslaught of fire and fury is further reinforced by straight ass blasters like Satanic Anarchy, Barbarian, and Seven Serpents' competitor for Song of the Album, Psychotic Imperator. I'd also like to give special mention to Death Scream and the very Elven King evocative Tränen Palast, which both contain brutal guest vocal contributions from Britta Goetz of the, at the time unknown to me, melodic death metal outfit Heroes. You definitely earned yourself a fan and an investigative listen with these albums. To put it plainly, there's not a bad song in this bunch, and while the title track is the closest to just being solid, there's more than enough magic in the aforementioned songs, as well as in Blood of Our Blood, the glitchy clean intro, cool harmonized solo section and snare march bridge of Combatants, and anthemic closer Loyal to the Grave. Quarter 1 placement, great. Soen, Reliance. Brainchild of former Opeth drummer Martin Lopez, Soen aimed to deliver another dose of progressive-tinged alternative metal with their 7th effort, and honestly, I'm a bit conflicted on how I feel about this one. Discordia easily stands out as my favorite track on the whole, with its very minimal and Blackfield-esque key textures in the verses, synthy bridge, and especially the heavy riffs that kick up into that extra gear in the middle and end stretches. Draconian offers some great warbly-sounding keys and is jam-packed with great guitar work, especially in the bridge, while album closer Velicor presents a more consistently mellow vibe that I really dig. And along with the more ballady Indifferent is a welcome breath of fresh air on an album of mid-tempo modern prog-style songs, which I suppose segues into my concerns with the album as a whole. Now don't be mistaken, all the songs are very competently written and performed, and there are a lot of cool individual riffs and sections. Things like the verse drum grooves in Primal, the main riff of Mercenary, as well as the added vocal chants towards its conclusion. The cowbell in the chorus of Axis and Drifter's bridge riff and prominent bass come to mind. However, I can't deny that the majority of the pieces on this release fall within a somewhat limited and rather same-ish set of tempos, grooves, and vibes. Fine as individual pieces, but perhaps a bit under-realized as a collective experience. Quarter 1 placement, solid. Megadeth, self-titled. While many of the older thrash metal stalwarts still seem to have plenty of fuel in the tank to keep our heads banging for the foreseeable future, this year, whether we love them or not, we say farewell to a band that was an undeniable force in their time. With due respect properly observed, how does the last ride out for Dave Mustaine and his revolving door of variably merry men stand against all that came before it? To kick things off, Tipping Point comes running and gunning out of the gate with all the piss and vinegar of the other two post-Super Collider albums. It's a pure shredder that shares good company with other aggressive cuts like Made to Kill, which has a pretty damn cool transition out of its verses, and the obviously autobiographical Let There Be Shred. You've also got some pretty solid selections on the mid-tempo side in Puppet Parade and Hey God. As a side note, while not a compliment to any particular song, I sort of like what they did with the vocal production across the board here. Or maybe it's just Dave keeping himself to the less obnoxious end of his range. That being said, the album is far from perfect. I don't expect Pulitzer Prize-winning writing from this band, but the lyricism of I Don't Care is certainly something, to say the least. I also have questions as to why that song, as well as stuff like Another Bad Day or I Am War, or the cover, which I'll get into, couldn't have been swapped out for the bonus tracks that came with some of the exclusive versions. But that's small fry ticky-tack stuff. The most egregious misstep is not letting the last note close the fucking record, because it was absolutely purpose-built for that role, especially with the amazing classical guitar solo that comes in halfway through and the acoustic ending. Megadeth genuinely writes some pretty nice clean sections, and it's a shame that side of their dynamic is so criminally underutilized. Addressing the elephant in the room, or the track list I suppose, the Ride the Lightning cover is what it is. It's played very much straight off the original record, except for the down-tuning and 64-year-old Dave Mustaine trying to sing 21-year-old James Hetfield, which goes about how you expect. Overall, this album is fine, perhaps a tad underwhelming given some of the decisions made in the context of the prior albums, but a capable enough send-off with a couple relatively strong rounds hidden in the chamber. Quarter 1 placement, solid. Callused Wing, One Last Great Day. It's my band. I play on the album. God tier, simple as. Only joking, but if you do like instrumental post-rock with some progressive elements, check that shit out. I'll put a link in the description. Anyway, let's get back to the actual music. Joji, Piss in the Wind. So let me get this straight. We've already got an ongoing thrash renaissance, new Joji music, and new albums from Failure and American Football set for quarter 2. That's it. I don't care if it's too early. I'm officially declaring 2026 the year of the thrash-tacular sad boys. Overzealous trend setting aside, while previous efforts Nectar and Smithereens are relatively good in their own rights, they were both a little short on some of the intangible magic that initially drew me into Ballads 1, the In Tongues EP, and the unfortunately rug-pulled Chloe Burbank material. I'm elated to say that Piss in the Wind promptly gave me the fix I had been needing with the opening trio of Pixelated Kisses, Cigarette, and especially Last of a Dying Breed. While the peak of this album does come fairly early, there's still more than enough moments and moods to enjoy within the shoegazy, duster-like guitar backing of Love You Less, the shimmery synth swells and low post-chorus oohs of Hotel California, or any song that uses piano, but especially the tone and audible key noise in Forehead Touch the Ground, Past Won't Leave My Bed, Horses to Water, and Can't See Shit in the Club. There are still a few elements of this record that miss for me, mostly anything with features on it, and a couple of just okay stretches in the middle and end. But at least that middle lull is more than made up for with how hard Sojourn and Don't You Know I Love You go back to back. Quarter 1 placement? Good. Mayhem, Liturgy of Death. Hail! You have come upon this place at a most opportune moment, for the time of celebration is nigh. After 7 years in slumber, the lords of chaos once again stir. So come one and come all, you sons of northern darkness, and prepare your ears for the Liturgy of Death. Okay, seriously now though, 2 bits in a row is more than enough. No more. To let you all behind the curtain a bit, I've been going through the discographies for each of the bands on this list ahead of their album release. and I found myself particularly amazed with how much influence from their super avant-garde 2000 effort Grand Declaration of War has managed to carry through and been refined over each successive release. Far from just being the generic buzzing tin can production of tremoloed tritonal terror, the black metal sound that Mayhem have crafted is a dense and immersive storm of sensory slaughter. From the first moments of ephemeral eternity to the hypnotic final percussion of the sentence of absolution, you instantly feel as if you've stumbled upon some perverse and ancient rite in progress, blasted by thundering drum beats and dizzying guitar riffs. Meanwhile, high upon his pulpit, longtime vocalist Attila delivers the wretched words of some heretical sermon, sometimes in gravelly croaks, sometimes in shouts, and other times in soaring operatic wails, as if channeling whatever malevolent spirit of old ceremony is held for. But enough of the flowery purple prose. How does this album stand out among the rest? Well, if it wasn't already obvious, I am blown away with the collection of works that Mayhem have managed to compile this time around. Aeon's End, Realm of Endless Misery, Propitious Death, and the previously mentioned openers and closers stand out to me, but every song is in the range of good to godly on its own merits, and each expertly maintain the horrific and heavy atmosphere that the record labors to create. This is a must-listen if you're a fan of the genre. Quarter 1 placement? Great. Converge, Love Is Not Enough. One of the standout names from the Boston School of Hardcore, and a band that admittedly took me far too long to finally get into. Love Is Not Enough sees Converge turn the dial up on the frenetic, sludgy, punkish mathcore sound that brought them to early acclaim, while also, much like Kreator before them, maintaining and better distilling the melodic sense that had become an increasingly larger element with the progression of the group's discography. The band's 11th record comes after a 5-year gap from the Blood Moon collaboration with Chelsea Wolfe, is the first collection of non-collaborative material since 2017's The Dusk in Us, and takes off running, setting a brutally efficient pace, using just about every second of its half-hour runtime to pummel you. Whether it be the rapid rhythmic sprints of Distract and Divide, To Feel Something, and We Were Never the Same, winding riffs like those found in the title track, as well as Make Me Forget You, or the bludgeoning breakdowns of Bad Faith, Amon Amok, and Force Meets Presence. This is a track list that feels like being thrown around a near non-stop mosh pit that really only takes the shortest of breaks with Beyond Repair and Gilded Cage before jumping right back into the maelstrom. This is a lean, mean, and super easy listen that, very much like Kreator and Mayhem, spares little, if any, room for fluff. Quarter 1 placement? Great. Good Tiger, the most negative day of the year. Good Tiger have been on my periphery for a little while, but I hadn't given the group a proper listen, so I figured what better time than as they're dropping a new release. If you'll allow me a brief digression to explain why I've had my eye on this group, once upon a time in the long-forgotten land of 2013, there existed a band called The Safety Fire. They were part of what would come to be a very taste-influencing concert lineup, opening for Between the Buried and Me, and played very energetic and aggressive style of progressive metal. That band unfortunately broke up in 2015, but the group's guitarists Duria and Joaquin would go on to start another band, whose album we can now get back to talking about. So yeah, suffice to say I came into my listening of this band with some expectations, and to get it out of the way now, Good Tiger is not The Safety Fire. They don't get anywhere close to scratching the same itch, but that in no way means they're bad, just different. What Good Tiger offers is a blending of technically proficient prog metal and shimmery Mars Volta-tinged alt-rock, where the prog side, especially in the drumming, shines in songs like Square Breath, Decades on My Feet, and The Thief of Joy, while the alternative stylings poke out strongest in Beehive, Blissful Indifference, and the moody mantra and killer atmosphere of the title track. This album definitely does a better job of alleviating the mid-tempo prog issues that anchored Soen to the bottom half of the list, as even though I'm not equally into everything this collection offers, I certainly can't say that each song fails to stand out as its own. Quarter 1 placement? Good. Nothing. A Short History of Decay. Nothing is a band that was initially brought to my attention by their inclusion on the 2022 lineup of the Indianapolis-based Post Festival, an event viewers of last year's list will likely remember being attached to numerous bands and albums within it, and the only festival that I will buy tickets for without a lineup, because I know for a fact that I'll always leave the weekend with a plethora of new artists to check out and get into. Though even before I had heard a note of their airy, sometimes hard-driven shoegaze, seeing Cloakroom frontman Doyle Martin slinging the axe and providing backing vocals was all the endorsement I needed. This latest offering is a roughly even split between a pair of sounds and styles. The first heard being the moody strumming, sparkly guitar builds and post-punk bass lines of songs like Never Come, Never Morning, which also features very nice brass contributions, the aptly titled Purple Strings with its violin, cello, and harp additions, as well as The Rain Don't Care and Nerve Scales. These songs are lush in their restraint, and this approach could have made a good album in its own right. However, the style exhibited on the second track is where this album truly caught me within its grasp, almost to the detriment of the former. As of writing and recording this, Cannibal World holds a fairly comfortable seat as one of my favorite individual tracks among the current field. It's an instantly grabbing, blurring rush of glitchy electronic amen breaks and looming heavily affected guitar swells and snarling distorted bass. While the title track and Toothless Coal don't go quite as hard as their progenitor, all three tracks bring a sense of urgency and drive that plays well against the lazily floating dreaminess of the aforementioned compositions. As an extra note of no less import, there is also the closer Essential Tremors, which sits as the closest thing to a bridge between the two styles, starting firmly in the strummy side of things and then ramping up the dynamics as the time passes. This is an album and band I would recommend checking out, and I would love to see further efforts continue to explore this more intense vein the band has tapped. Quarter 1 placement? Good. Squeeze. Trixies. An album 52 years in the making, written when primary songwriters Chris Difford and Glenn Tilbrook were still in their teens, predating the band's 1978 debut effort by 4 years and hampered by the landscape shift of the burgeoning new wave scene. Trixies weaves a sonic web around the days, nights, people, and spectacles of the fictional namesake establishment. It's not a concept album in the sense of having one coherent story, but more in that each song paints new detail within the same canvas, which creates a genuinely immersive and capturing atmosphere throughout its runtime. As for the songs themselves, there's quite a variety of sounds and styles at play here that range from the chill, clean guitars of What More Can I Say, You Get the Feeling, and It's Over, to the more straight-line rock and roll bops of Why Don't You and the Jaguars, as well as the jazzy brass of the title track's two parts, and the very Elvis Costello-like Hell on Earth and Don't Go Out in the Dark. Within all of these different moods and moments, the biggest through line you'll find apart from the setting is the always lively keyboard parts and textures that anyone who knows Squeeze is already familiar with, and anyone who's interested in them will soon come to be. While there hasn't really been a properly bad album in the band's repertoire, this one definitely feels like a step back up from the last few, and was certainly worth the 9-year wait between this and Knowledge. So come on in, sit down, stay a while, have a drink and watch the show, because like the album accurately states several times, Trixies is alright. Quarter 1 placement? Good. Lamb of God, Into Oblivion. Another band that, much like Converge, took me far too long to finally get into, Lamb of God's 10th album initially had me worried when I first listened to leading single Sepsis. While my concerns with that particular song have softened with further listening, I'm happy to report that the majority of this record keeps to the group's modus operandi of beating its listeners' ears with groovy but still thrashing melodicism, chunky breakdowns, and powerful precision drum performances. The instant we get out of the title track's intro and the first proper riff kicks in, the album sets a pain train a-rollin' that somehow gathers even more speed, going into the absolutely blistering barrage of Parasocial Christ, in which Art Cruz's drumming very closely channels iconic former stick maestro Chris Adler. Meanwhile, surrounded by the doomy stomping of Sepsis and the admittedly slower and largely cleaner Elvatio, the Killing Floor keeps the ass kicking on the tracks with a breakdown reminiscent of Meshuggah if they accidentally started playing a higher string. The back half of the album starts off with the winding melodies of St. Catherine's Wheel before bringing the beat down with the effectively titled pair of Blunt Force Blues and Bully. After one last slow song in 1,000 Years, we bring the energy back up one more time to close out with Devise Destroy. To me, this is Lamb of God's best total output of the 2020s so far, and while the self-titled and Omens are in no way bad albums, Into Oblivion's flame is one that flickers in spots, but still burns at an overall longer, stronger, and brighter clip than its decade-sharing predecessors. Quarter 1 placement, good. Soft Machine, 13. One of the cornerstone groups from the endlessly fruitful Canterbury scene of the late 60s and early 70s, while this progressive psychedelic turned jazz rock outfit has seen a fair number of changes in styles, lineups, and even names, one thing that remains consistent is their ability to create interesting and dynamic tunes. Of the 13 tracks on this 13th album, Open Road stands out as my favorite, with regular Steven Wilson contributor and former Gong member Theo Travis putting in an album MVP level performance, becoming a seemingly multi-armed force to lay down a heaping helping of tasteful keys and saxophone over bassist Fred Baker's rumbling overdriven foundation, while also adding the flute to his already wide arsenal in Waltz for Robert, Disappear, and the 13-minute epic The Longest Night. I also particularly enjoy the flowing licks, rolling drums, and chill electronic piano of Lemon Poem Song, the dual guitar and sax lines of Time Station, the groovy green books and pens to the full mode, as well as the mellow swells of David's special Cuppa, which sees a posthumous contribution from founding member David Allen. Overall, while I feel like the album could definitely have stood to cut some tracks in length to help improve the flow, as it is, there's more than enough sights on this ride to make it worth rolling through again. Quarter 1 placement, solid. The Deer Hunter, Sunya. A band seemingly only able to make concept records, aside from Migrant, but shh. The Deer Hunter's newest musical lore drop introduces us to the lands outside of the ringed city established in 2022's Antimai, and teased by the orchestral Indigo Child EP before that. And while I don't have a full grasp on the story yet, what I do know is that musically, this album dips itself in so many different sounds and styles that I'm amazed it holds its coherency, let alone kicks as much ass as it ends up kicking. Off the rip, the intro to The Wasteland straight up sounds like something Stuart Copeland could have composed for one of the classic Spyro games, and the way that the final chorus builds and releases around the 5.5-minute mark is simply stunning. Next up, Marauders is a shorter, livelier cut that lets the band's mastermind Casey Crescenzo rip a few rawer vocal moments, while the bizarre Eteria grooves its way into the title of my favorite on the tracklist with a bass synth sound that instantly reminded me of the opening track on Bill Bruford's 1979 release One of a Kind. After these, we come to the trilogy of songs that make up The Glass Desert, with the first part, Giants, washing the listener in shimmery synth sparkles, more groovy-ass bass, and an incredible back half rise in tempo that brings in some absolutely fantastic brass. Now admittedly, the other two parts do see the album's runaway momentum stumble a little, at least to me, but each still offers some pretty cool stuff, with part 2, Cliffs and Stormlands, keeping the groovy bass train rolling as well as having a pretty sick spot of harmonica in the middle section. And the Plains feature some very country-esque, or maybe even Yes-inspired guitar work, and ends with a very dreamy outro section that carries perfectly into the title track finale's more mellow strings and overall atmosphere, up until the last 2 minutes where the brass comes back in full fantastic swing. For the second year in a row now, the month of March has served up some excellent prog rock. Here's hoping this tradition continues for a long while, and here's hoping the next chapter in this saga can meet or exceed what's already been given in the first 2 entries. Quarter 1 placement, great. Exodus, Goliath. More thrash for the stash. Exodus's most recent effort since the 2025 re-departure of primary vocalist Steve Zetro Souza sees Rob Dukes return to the fold for the first time since 2010's Exhibit B. And holy hell does this album burst into the room and start unloading banger after banger. After a bit of mood setting in the intro, 3111 launches into a furious onslaught of everything that I love about thrash, with mainstay guitar hero Gary Holt proving that he still has a seemingly bottomless supply of killer riffs, harmonized leads, and ripping solos to pull from. This persistently punishing pace is further punctuated by performances like Hostis Humani Generis, the evolving start-stop intro riffing of Promise You This, the fittingly non-stop whirlwind beyond the event horizon, and the dirtiest of the dozen driving the record to a close. On the slower end of the speed spectrum, the title track stomps out a sinister vibe with a monstrous bass tone and wailing verse and chorus lines, while the Changing Me blasts you with a massive sounding wall of guitars. The 8-minute pounder Summon of the God Unknown weaves a web of intricate but powerful parts, and Violence Works a seriously grooving set of riffs that'll keep your head bobbing along for the entire runtime. I don't know what hidden source these veteran thrash bands have been getting this extra sauce from for the last few years, but I'm going to be throwing out regular prayers that it doesn't run dry anytime soon, because these albums are always a joy to get to in this project. Quarter 1 placement, great. Gaerea, Loss. The fifth album from these masked metalers of Portugal, Loss continues the expansion of their foundational black metal sound with the inclusion of more atmospheric elements and a more condensed and direct style of songwriting, a direction the band have been working towards since their third album Mirage, and especially the follow-up Coma. This is another one that I find myself conflicted with, because on one hand, you have songs that are straight bangers like Luminary with those killer strings at the end, as well as Hellbound, Cyclone, and Uncontrolled with its rising brass-like swells. And on the other hand, you've also got stuff that's much closer to just okay, like Phoenix with its oddly short and somewhat disjointed clean intro, along with Submerged and The Nomad. There are unfortunately also some songs in the closing stretch that I just don't like, namely the ballady Stardust, which gives me the most concern for the direction that future efforts may turn toward, because to be frank, I do not listen to this band for clean vocals and breathy, rap-like sections. Though I will excuse Cyclone for its generally more fitting execution vibe-wise. Honestly, something about the dialed-back vocal intensity across the board just doesn't click with me, and I feel like the majority of this album suffers from a case of right elements, wrong band, and that this might be a step or two too far away from what I enjoyed about the prior releases. Though hopefully this is just a bump in the road and not an omen. Quarter 1 placement, meh. Neurosis, an undying love for a burning world. First off, yes, it has been more than 4 hours. Yes, I am still hard enough to crush carbon in the diamonds. No, I will not be calling a doctor. Secondly, how dare you, Neurosis? How dare you shadow drop this? I was disappointed, but completely understood when the band came to a screeching halt after everything that came out about Scott Kelly. I was sad in the thought we wouldn't get another album after Fires Within Fires, but I at least thought to myself, what a note to go out on. But after how many years of radio silence, you barge through the door unannounced and not only drop new material into my lap, but you go out and get Aaron fucking Turner from my favorite band of all time, ISIS, to play guitar and contribute vocals to it? How could I even be mad at you? After an incendiary call to action, courtesy of We Are Torn Wide Open, we get the first sample of this new partnership with Mirror Deep, and to my absolute lack of shock, Turner's demonic, ragged yells and wild howls fit like magic with a band that has not only not lost a step, but somehow gotten even better, as I'm instantly reminded that for how much I love Steve Von Till's other musical ventures, he will always shine the brightest among the unmatched chaos of Noah Landis' synth work, Dave Edwardson's monolithic bass, and Jason Roeder's concussive assault on the drums. This pristine mix of suffocatingly sludgy atmosphere continues with First Red Rays, which perfectly highlights the ability these gentlemen have always had to seemingly switch from clubbing your skull in to weaving some truly serene passages before picking the clubs right back up and getting back to bashing like nothing happened. The opening riff to Blind might be, without hyperbole, one of my top 5 favorite things Neurosis has ever written. And on first listen, my head was banging and I was already in full stank face before I was even conscious of either thing happening. I'm trying to come up with unique things to say about each song, but it's tough because Sieving and Scattered, perfection. Especially the entire synth and drum build-up in the middle that breaks out into wild percussion and feedback screeches. The bass tone and groovage in Untethered after the guitar intro is beyond nasty and contrasts so well against the sparkly synth movements, while the closing pair of the 10-minute In the Waiting Hours and the 17-minute Last Light, both provide a heaping dose of the long-form building that the band does so damn well, with the latter tracks starting on a really cool electronic pulse that eventually buzzes, swells, swirls, and screams into a genuinely beautiful, almost post-rock level final stretch. I would like to offer an apology in advance to every other album that I'll be covering this year, because if it wasn't already obvious, this is what you're running up against to make the top bar now. Quarter 1 placement, godly. The Casualties, Detonate. Ah, Tony Hawk game soundtracks. What an evergreen fountain of fantastic finds. Even before my younger self started hoarding bands and albums like some dragon of myth, the moment I heard the song Unknown Soldier while skating around the world of Underground 2, I knew that I had to hear more of these New York punks. Detonate comes after an 8-year gap from 2018's Written in Blood, and is only the second release the band has made since the retirement of long-serving vocalist Jorge Herrera. While the band are still just as loud, fast, and angry as they've ever been, with new singer David Rodriguez taking the unenviable task of being the man to step into the shoes of a beast, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still adjusting to the air gap where Herrera's mic-blowing presence used to be. That being said, songs like the title track and People Over Power, along with the closing trio of Pigs on Fire, Streets of Hatred, and Wake Up, Kill, Repeat, are total rippers that make it clear the fire is still very much raging in these boys as they beat the shit out of their respective instruments. Ashes of War, Allies and Assassins, Empire Falls, and Brick by Brick showcase the band's always effective use of melody, gang vocals, and the punk staple woes. I'd also like to specifically highlight Few the True, which contains an awesome guitar line that shows up across the entire piece in various forms. Clocking in at a little under half an hour, this is a fun little record that flies right by and will have you singing along and banging your head all over the track list. Quarter 1 placement, good. Myrath, Wilderness of Mirrors. Closing this portion of the year out on an international note, with the release of their 7th album, these Tunisian tunesmiths have officially produced more music in their power metal-infused, almost symphonic style of prog than the longer and more technically flashy Dream Theater-inspired works of their first 3 efforts. There's always a gamble involved with any potential sonic evolution, but thus far Myrath have generally been able to produce at an equal or better quality within this particular sonic canvas, and I would say that Wilderness of Mirrors holds up to that standard. Coming out of the vocal intro build, The Funeral kicks off with some pretty chunky verse riffing that blooms into these big choruses that feature a nice touch of guitar strum noise, as well as a funky-ass slap-and-pop bass bridge. Immediately after this, Until the End features some really nice guest vocal accompaniments, especially in the chorus, and some great keys that pick up from the second verse onward. Completing the trio of stellar opening tracks, Breathing Near the Roar builds a very cool vibe with its opening chants and electronic foundations that still leave ample room for some nice guitar and bass parts. A couple other songs of note would be The Clown and Echoes of the Fallen. For everything I can highlight as a standout in this collection, there are still a few underwhelming moments. For example, while I do enjoy a lot of the opening stretch for Les Enfants du Soleil, with its children's choir into acoustic section and the first few heavy riffs afterwards, as well as the sweeping orchestral bridge a bit further in, I do feel like it starts to suffer from length in the latter half. In the same vein, there are a few tracks in the middle stretch that I could take or leave. Overall, though, I can easily tell you that this instantly offered a more engaging and memorable experience than 2024's Karma, which is currently the only record where I feel the band had stumbled in matching their own established standard. Definitely give these guys a listen. They have a really solid grasp on how to mix their folky, symphonic, and metallic elements into an experience that's catchy and polished without feeling like they've strayed into the realm of being inauthentic. Quarter 1 placement, good. And that's it. After 17 albums and just a touch shy of 13 hours of music, we have reached the end of Quarter 1 for the 2026 tier list. Hopefully the half hour or so I spent on that felt quick enough. I want to thank everybody who made it this far. It means a lot to me to have an outlet to talk about all these different bands and sounds that I find so much enjoyment in. As I said at the front of the video, feel free to let me know any albums that I might have missed that came out this year, or if you've heard some of the albums that I've talked about and agree with my opinion or think I'm an idiot who is totally off the mark and needs to get his ears fixed. Now, before I bring this to a close, I did mention an announcement at the start of the video, albeit in text form. And what I want to announce is that I'm going to be doing an audio surf stream on Saturday, April the 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, where I'll be playing the role of pseudo DJ while playing through some of my favorite songs from each of these albums that we've discussed in the list. One thing to note, because DMCA is a complete and utter bastard, this will be an unarchived stream, meaning that once the last notes of the last song are finished ringing out and the thank yous and goodbyes are said, I'll be nuking the stream from my page. No VOD, no record, no nothing. So it's be there in the moment or miss out entirely. I'll probably post a playlist afterwards, but there's not going to be much else after that. To reiterate, that is Saturday, April 4th, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. I hope to catch some of y'all there hanging and jamming out. But that's going to do it for this one. Going to work on getting the stream ready and make preparations for quarter 2, which will cover April, May, and June. With 23 albums already on my radar and currently only one announced for early June, I have a pretty solid feeling that this is going to be the longest piece out of the 4. So please look forward to that, and until next we meet, keep on listening, no matter the sound. Later.